Four, please. On the tee from New York, New York, Gabby Herzig, the writer from The Athletic, coming on with us to talk about the year of superstars, the year of maybe historic seasons. Scottie Scheffler and Nelly Korda doing incredible things right now. Nelly is going to the Chevron, the first women's major of the season, winning 4 straight starts. So she's trying to make it 5 straights. In terms of the men's side, Scottie Scheffler wins the Masters, wins in 3 out of his last 4 starts, came in T2 position in the other start, doing some incredible things. And maybe we're starting to hear the word Tiger thrown around. Not ready to compare him to Tiger Woods in terms of the entire career, obviously. He's got a long way to go to reach Tiger levels. But in terms of having a season compatible with the best seasons that Tiger Woods had, well, that is a conversation to be had. So I talked with Gabby all about these two superstars, what their years could mean, and what sort of checkpoints and benchmarks we need to see from them to consider their seasons among the most historic of all time. So from The Athletic, not from Sports Illustrated, Gabby Herzig coming up on Eyes on Golf right now. Really happy to have Gabby Herzig on right now, a staff writer for The Athletic, newly anointed staff writer for The Athletic and hitting the ground running, previously of Sports Illustrated. And Gabby, we have to mention former captain of the Pomona Pitzer golf team.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I'm honored to be here and to talk a little golf.
You are coming back from 2 weeks on the road at Augusta National. You've got, for those watching maybe on YouTube, you've got a nice St. Andrews picture behind you. So, tough places to be around the golf world. But I mean, first, just your reaction to spending 2 weeks at Augusta for ANWA and the Masters.
Yeah, it was a long 2 weeks. I keep telling people that it feels like I just came back from Mars or something. Like when you're there, you genuinely feel like you're kind of on another planet. And even when you're kind of driving on Washington Road and you're just like seeing, the gas stations, the little strip malls, and then you turn into Augusta and the kind of land opens up to this expansive, beautiful, pristine property with crazy elevation changes that you would never expect just driving by the course down the road. And so it really blew me away. It was my first time covering the Masters, but I had been to the tournament before as a 12-year-old. In 2011, I went with my dad and my grandparents, and we saw Schwartzel win, and it was also the year that Rory collapsed on the back nine. So very iconic Masters to attend, and I have a lot of awesome memories from that week and experiencing the course for the first time. But it was really cool to like match everything up with actually covering the tournament as a journalist and being there on site and telling stories. So it was just an incredible week. I'm still like coming down from the Augusta high a little bit. I just got my disposable camera photos back, and I'm kind of having like a little second wind of like excitement about the property. Like it's just so magical. Some cool shots of like the green and white umbrellas and the par 3 course, and it's just a very nostalgic place in general. So I was just grateful to be even on property again.
Well, what we have in common is that I always tell people what really got me into wanting to cover golf was being at the 2006 U.S. Open and watching Phil's collapse there. So you saw the Rory collapse.
Really?
I saw the Phil's collapse. I guess that's where that's where sometimes the seeds of golf journalism are planted. And on this podcast, I really want to get your take on specifically Scottie Scheffler and Nelly Korda, who you've both, in your move already to The Athletic, you've covered I would say extensively already in terms of these stories that are developing around these two players having historic seasons. But first, because you mentioned that Augusta 2011 story, just for people that don't know your background, how'd you get to where you are right now? How'd you go from being a high school golfer in New York City, which is never an easy task? I can say what I can say as a Westchester kid, but I didn't actually grow up in the concrete jungle, and then getting to this job now at The Athletic.
Yeah, it's a weird journey for sure. Unconventional to say the least, but I'm definitely used to schlepping my clubs on the subway, on public transportation. Um, I will say, very lucky to have supportive parents growing up, who would, take my brother and I to junior golf tournaments all over the tri-state area of New York. Honestly, some of the most golf that we played growing up in the city was at Met PGA junior golf tournaments. So kind of hopping around to all the different country clubs that would host those 9-hole or 18-hole events for kids. That's where a lot of my playing experience came from when I was growing up. But on top of that, I have grandparents who are very passionate about the game. My grandpa played at the University of Minnesota. My grandma was a junior state champion in the Minneapolis area as well. And they were the ones that really instilled the love of golf in me. So when I was younger, my family would go out to, they now live in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we would go out there, visit them. That's where I took my first golf lessons. My lifelong coach, Bobby Eldridge, was a huge influence on me as well. And I still have an amazing relationship with him today. So I've known him since I was like 5 years old. So just those relationships and that kind of like family love of golf really got me into the sport in the first place. And so going through high school and college, I obviously played competitively, but I kind of knew that I wanted golf to be part of my life in some way, even though I was never at the level where I
Mhm.
was going to play professionally. I was, like in college, my scoring average was like a 78 or something. I was always that kind of player. And I just started to think about like how I could make that happen basically. And one year, I think my freshman year of college, the summer, I got kind of a random opportunity to be a runner for the Fox Sports TV production of the Shinnecock US Open
Mhm.
and the Curtis Cup that year. And I had no idea what I was going to be doing. You know, I did everything from driving around Shane Bacon in a golf cart to helping a features interview
A
producer
needy,
figure
needy
out.
guy, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's really fun. It's very full circle now that I'm like friends with Shane and like play golf with him. I literally was driving him around in a golf cart and like fetching his suits from the UPS store. Um, and now, yeah, so I did like features interview help. I helped like some of the producers come up with questions for the best players in the world when I was just a freshman in college. And it was just a really rewarding experience just being in the media center, seeing kind of the energy on the ground at a major. And after that, I kind of was just like, this is what I want to do. I want to be in the golf media. I can feel this being like the right place for me. So I started writing for my school newspaper, chasing internships in the industry. I was at NBC Sports one summer. And then eventually, during college, I landed an internship with Golf Digest, which really set me on the path that I'm on today. And it honestly wouldn't have been possible without the pandemic because I interned for them when I was a senior in college still. I was doing it remotely from like my tiny room in Claremont, California. And I would have been traveling the country playing golf tournaments if it weren't for the
Mhm.
pandemic. So it kind of all worked out in my favor. The timing was perfect and eventually worked for them for a year, then transited to Sports Illustrated. And now I'm here at The Athletic. So that's a long-winded answer, and there are a lot of
No,
like
but
bumps along the way and different stories that I could go into at each of those kind of opportunities. But that's basically the shortish version of it.
it's a good, interesting synopsis, and even in your short tenure, has those interesting storylines. Shinnecock, it's funny because I know I covered that U.S. Open, and what I loved about it was you could take the train from New York City
Right.
to the
Yes.
Hamptons. They had a specific train directly to Shinnecock Hills, and in terms of the train, I know in your piece for the Athletic about your why I'm going to the Athletic piece.
Yes.
You mentioned Van Cortlandt Park and
Right.
playing. I believe you played for Riverdale in high
Mhm.
school and went to play at Van Cortlandt Park. There's a great scratch feature in Adventures in Golf by Eric Anders Lang on all about the history of that being, I believe, the first public golf course or the oldest public golf course in the United
Yes.
States. What's the connection with that course?
Yeah, that was our high school home course. So, the Riverdale girls golf team would practice there, a couple times a week. We would have our matches there. The the structure of our high school golf program was 9-hole match play. So,
Same here.
it was just
Oh,
awesome
not match
because
play, stroke play, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so the girls was match play, which was hilarious because, most girls on the team were, like, just there to get out of gym class during the day and have something to do, and I kinda treated it as, like, my, pre-summer practice in a way. So my senior year, it's kind of funny, like, I don't think I played more than 6 holes in a match, which was awesome. But yeah, Van Cortlandt is a quirky, super fun place. It's one of those courses where I can imagine every single bunker and every single twist of the fairways. And I grew up playing on courses like that. Like Mosholu is another one that I played a
Hmm.
bunch with my brother growing up. And yeah, like, same homeless guy sitting on the fourth tee, like every time we would show up. It's just quintessential New York golf. So we would have our matches there, we'd have practices there. And it very much was kind of the setting or backdrop for my golf experience growing up as a New Yorker, and definitely an unconventional one, like I mentioned earlier, but one that I look back on with such fond memories.
No, it's there's a hustle about New York. You mentioned golf on the subway. I did something at Golf Tech today, which is just opening in New York, and I had to take my clubs on the subway. I was trying to film my own content. Luckily, a good Samaritan asked if I would need her to take a picture of me, and I said, actually, could you do video if that's possible? So
I'm excited to see how that turns out.
yeah, yeah, we'll see. But let's get back into now that we've got the background. Let's get back into you're made it. You're at Augusta National. You're covering everything this week, and the story which was coming into the Masters about Scottie Scheffler, in a very chalky format, develops, and everything that everyone expected essentially seemed to come together. What was the feeling on the ground like of the aura of Scottie Scheffler and where he is now winning 3 of his last 4 starts?
Yeah, the aura of Scotty is, simply he's unbeatable right now. I went into the tournament personally just telling everyone that I knew that he was gonna win by 6 shots, so I was pretty close. If you've been paying attention, and also the story about his putting and how that's improved over the past month and a half or so, it's very difficult to imagine a scenario where he wouldn't have won this week. He was always lurking, he was always there. There wasn't ever a moment where you kind of were like, oh, maybe Scotty could disappear and kind of fall down the leaderboard. That was never even a question. He's just so cool to watch. He's so dialed in. He's so locked in. You could kind of even see it in his like facial expressions. He's not like the other players, fist bumping kids on, along the gallery ropes. He's he goes to the range after every single round, no matter how well he plays. He has that routine totally locked in and dialed, and it's just incredibly cool to witness in person. So I had a great time watching him on Sunday. It was cool to observe like his demeanor throughout the round, and when it wasn't quite his, and then even when the tournament was his, nothing changed in his expression and how he talked to Ted and the whole thing. So it's just awesome to, I think, witness something so great unfolding before our eyes. I kind of wrote about that in my Sunday story. And although, like, the Tiger comparisons are obviously hugely debatable, and no one's going to come close to Tiger and his records, especially not, there's just nothing that can really compare to that right now. But what we're seeing from Scotty, he is starting to join Tiger in some records, and some records that you know are really important and huge. Like winning the Players and the Masters in one season is a huge feat, and Scotty and Tiger are the only two people who have done that. So there's a lot to unpack. But yeah, those are kind of some of my initial observations.
Yeah, Tiger did that in 2001. Since you brought up the Tiger comparisons, we kind of have to
Right.
go down
Yeah.
that road a little bit. The number that I'm looking at really is that since strokes gained total has been a stat since 2004, it's been recorded. Only Tiger has surpassed that 3.0 mark. Scotty's at
Hmm.
2.812, I believe now. So I think for the stat heads, that's going to be something that people are really going to have to follow. And then there are these different benchmarks. They're all kind of arbitrary. That how do we rank a Scotty season compared to one of the best of all time? Is 3 majors the barrier that you need to get to? Is it say 6 wins? What are some of those benchmarks that we should be looking toward for Scotty's season?
Yeah, the strokes gain thing is super interesting. There's another stat, I think it's like, Justin Ray could rattle it off better than I could, but, it's, the since strokes gain has been around, he had, like, the best, tee to green average for a single PGA Tour season since Tiger Woods, but then Tiger has, like, the 7 best before Scotty or something like that. So there's still obviously an insane gap here, but Scotty is like frequently like in the same sentence as Tiger Woods, and even that is a huge feat, I would say. But yeah, some of the benchmarks, I mean, I think 3 majors is a lot. I personally don't think that's gonna happen. I'm gonna go with 2. I think I think the US Open is Scotty's, best chance at kind of blowing away the field like he did at Augusta National, Pinehurst with like the turtleback greens
Yeah.
and the native grass. It's going to favor Scotty hugely with how precise he is with his iron play, and just how much better a ball striker he is than anyone else in golf right now. So that's the one I'm eyeing. The strokes gain numbers are definitely interesting too because it kind of puts him in a historical context. But in terms of current benchmarks, I think like 2 majors is 1000% doable for him. 3 is a possibility too. I'm kind of iffy about Valhalla because it's like he probably will be a it's going to be like his second or third week with his newborn child, and Open Championship is always kind of a toss up with the weather. So those two, I'm feeling like a little more hesitant to predict. But I think Scottie Scheffler will be your U.S. Open champion.
All right, that's a call out there. I still think we really have to see Scotty at the Open before we can give him the career Grand Slam. That is
Right.
kind of an area where I know he has one top 10 there, but there's still kind of a little bit of outstanding,
Hmm.
can Scotty play links golf? I think I agree with you about Pinehurst. I brought up that 6 number that I felt was relevant.
Yeah.
I think Tiger won, looking right now, 8 times in 1999, won 9 times in 2000. So, Tiger and VJ doing those 9-win seasons. I don't think we're necessarily going to see that from Scotty this year. I don't think the guys play enough, and especially in what is really an
Right.
8-month season, it's a little bit more difficult. But there are these areas that we'll look to with Scotty, and there's also, Gabby, there's seasons that we've had in post Tigers prime. Rory in 2014 won 2 majors, had that dominant run where it seemed like he was unbeatable. Spieth came back the next year, almost won the career Grand Slam. Brooks had his run of majors. John Rahm last year at this time when he won the Masters was looking like he had one of the most dominant first 3 to 4 months of a calendar year on the PGA Tour. Why do you think it's feeling like Scotty's run right now is different? Obviously, he's been world number 1 for the better part of the last 3 years now, but it feels like this is a totally different form of dominance than anything else that we've seen post Tiger.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think statistics aside, I think the unique thing about Scottie Scheffler is something he kind of talks about a lot in his press conferences and when he does kind of open up to the media. He'll say like golf is not my life. Like I have, a greater kind of purpose beyond that. It's obviously has to do with his religious beliefs and um I'm not saying that's necessarily what separates him from every other great golfer that ever was, but his disposition and his ability to kind of stay above the fray and really not place like self-worth on his performance on the golf course is very unique and honestly like dangerous to his other competitors because that's something that's really hard to achieve and I don't think it's something that's going away anytime soon. So the unique the it factor for Scotty, I think, is what's between his ears. His mind is uncluttered, and actually, Rory had a great quote about Scotty after his Sunday round, just about how there's absolutely nothing going on in Scotty's head right now. Like he's so focused and kind of able to stay above the noise and out of stay away from distractions is incredibly unique and also just really hard to achieve in his position as the number 1 player in the world. He has a great team around him, but his own, I think, kind of his separation from actually being like Scottie Scheffler, the number 1 golfer in the world, is incredibly unique, I would say again, and something that we haven't really seen in other stars, I think in recent memory. Rory was like this kind of larger than life character, young kid, and Spieth is like all over the place, and he's known for kind of his erratic nature on the golf course, and Brooks is like this kind of tough guy, former, baseball player. But Scottie is really just like this down to earth human who is has magic hands on the golf course and has this unbelievable speed, and fundamentals, but in terms of his mentality, he's kind of like somewhere else in a way, which is unique and really special.
Yeah, the critique, if we could take this to the more narrative um, level of things, the critique on Scotty from the public has always been that, well, he's not interesting enough. He's too boring.
Right.
He's too vanilla. I shared this recently that I felt like in the last couple of months, the tide has turned in terms of the PR of Scotty, which I think winning always cures everything. And all of a sudden, there, instead of this feeling of, oh, this guy isn't providing us with the entertainment that we want, there's become this appreciation for dominance. I think it's very Roger Federer-esque in my mind, is just someone
Hmm.
who, if you take Federer and at the beginning of his career and you just put him in a room by himself with a microphone, other than, being elegant and kind of dashing and suave, there's not this necessarily illuminating personality about him. But Scotty, what he's doing right now reminds me a lot about that. And I shared that this week. Then the TV ratings came out and everyone seemed to go back to the
Right.
story of, well, he wasn't interesting enough. And that's why people weren't watching on Sunday afternoon. How do you feel about that narrative about Scotty? Is it on the media to cover him a certain way? Is it on Scotty to become more approachable and personable? What should be going on there, or what shouldn't be going on there?
Yeah, I actually think Scotty has become a little bit more personable since over the past maybe even 6 months. I don't remember when Golf Digest did this with him about the office like
Yeah.
quotes or something. Like he's been kind of coming out of his shell a little bit more as he continues to win, as he continues to get more exposure. Even like his pre-tournament press conference at the Masters, I thought was pretty awesome. Like KVV from No Laying Up asked him about his dad, and he kind of started to get emotional about his upbringing and being raised to be a good student and a nice kid instead of a great golfer. So he has a lot in him. I think we just need to actually bring it out. And in terms of the ratings, like obviously everyone wants a close golf tournament. That's going to be the most fun to watch on a Sunday. Of course, even like as a writer, I can be maybe bummed sometimes when someone blows away the field because there's just not as much to say, I guess. So there's both sides to it. I think it's really amazing what we're watching from Scotty, and just putting it in the historical context makes it more and more interesting. I can see why people think he's boring and think a four-shot victory at Augusta National isn't the most compelling thing, and you might just turn off your TV and go play golf yourself. I can totally relate to that. Like you already know what the result is going to be because this guy is so good and he won't falter at the finish line. There are different sides to it. I think it just depends on, obviously, yeah, it is a responsibility from the media to cover him, to ask the right questions, to get that like softer side of Scotty to open up, because I think the one thing that people do really appreciate about him is how humble he is. He just seems like a stand-up guy. He's a champion that really represents like the game of golf and the ethics around the game of golf and the honor and traditions that surround it. Like he perfectly embodies all of those things. So even looking at like social media comments, I see people saying like, wow, this is an amazing world number one that we have. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Mhm.
So I've been noticing a bit of that, which is encouraging to see. But I do think like we just have to appreciate what Scotty is doing and how talented he truly is. I think the footwork thing is really cool. Like he has
Mhm.
this unorthodox golf swing, that sometimes he looks like he's a 25 handicap, like falling over after his swing, and it's just hilarious to see. So there's some allure to Scotty Scheffler. You just have to dig it out of him.
And I know that you've dug into that in your work in terms of the footwork, in terms of the coaching that he's had with Randy Smith, bringing in Phil Kenyon. That's an interesting side to Scottie as well. What goes on with Scottie behind closed doors when he's practicing that we may not see just inside the ropes?
Yeah, I did. I did a little feature story about Scotty ahead of the Masters, obviously with him in mind as my pick to win, and it turned out to be super cool. I talked to Randy Smith, which obviously we've heard from Randy from various other outlets. He's been open about the fact that he is the type of coach who is going to work with what's in front of him. He's not going to change a student's swing because he thinks it should look a certain way. He kind of embraces your innate qualities as a golfer. You can see it in Justin Leonard, just like you see it in Scottie Scheffler. So that was cool to talk to Randy and just hear his philosophy about teaching golf. But it was also really cool to talk to Scottie's performance coach, Dr. Troy Van Biesen. He's actually works full time for the Dallas Stars NHL team now. He doesn't travel on the road with Scottie anymore, and he also works with Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, and Tom Kim, I believe, still. But he sends Scottie like daily workouts to do before and after he plays, and they're specifically catered to Scottie's swing. So like one of the cool things about the work that he does with Dr. Troy is like if he's watching, if Troy is watching the broadcast, let's say he said this about the players, where Scottie was kind of dealing with his neck injury. He was watching and he saw like maybe his right hip wasn't firing as much as his left hip. So he literally texted Scottie. I forget which round it was, but one of the rounds he basically adjusted Scottie's workout um, to give him more sets to do on his right leg than his left leg to kind of recalibrate the balance in his swing and make sure both sides of his body were synced up how they were supposed to be. So there's a level of detail that's paid to Scottie's off-course training that I don't think any of us really realize. Obviously, we know that since the Tiger era, golfers are working out, they're spending time in the gym, but there's incredibly precise movements that these guys are doing to allow them to be able to do what they can do out there, specifically with Scottie when his like ankles are flying all over the place and there's a lot of injury prevention involved with that. So there's some really cool stuff he's doing behind the scenes that really makes him the player that he is.
There's a lot of questions, right? Of should Scottie fix that footwork, fix
Yeah.
that swing? At this point, is it something that his team just rolls with? Is it something that Scottie is ever trying to fix? Is it something that other young players coming up should look to maybe learn from as they're growing in the game?
I would say do not try this at home, but no, Scotty actually, it was really interesting. Apparently, if you look back at his kind of old footage from high school and college, his foot actually used to start sliding before his downswing. So that was something that they had to kind of iron out and make sure his foot didn't move until after impact. That's one of the things that him and Randy have worked on. But in terms of like planting his feet to the ground, that was never really a conversation. I think Scotty was maybe tempted to like make his swing more aesthetic at some point in his high school career, but Randy very much encouraged him to like work with what he had and stay patient through. He had a massive growth spurt in high school, which really derailed his swing and kind of hurt his back for a while, and he had to just keep pushing through that. So the footwork is actually a strength of Scotty's. If you really look at his swing, it shows that he's using the ground properly. He's kind of springboarding off the ground because he's transferring so much power, and that allows him to get distance. It also allows him to work the ball both ways. One of the most amazing parts of Scotty's game is kind of his craftsmanship with being able to hit the shots that he wants to, and the way that his feet move actually allow him to have more of this like free flowing swing. So it's something that actually might not look like it, but it's a strength of Scotty's. Even though like we poke fun of it, and I wrote in my article that it looks like he's wearing rollerblades when he's swinging, but it's his thing. It's what makes Scotty Scotty.
He is the best ball striker in the world, so it's all adding up.
Yes.
In terms of the putting, he was not the best putter in the world last year,
Right.
significantly far from where he needed to be. And there's been a lot that's come out about him at the end of the year last year saying he needed to get specific putting help, went to Phil Kenyon. has become not just adopted the mallet putter, but has become a better putter. And that has been a lot of the secret to the success that he's had as of late. If he can go from being below average to average or even better, then Scottie becomes even more unbeatable. What was the scuttle about during Masters Week in terms of how Scottie was able to make these putting adjustments?
Yeah, it's definitely just I feel like he's gotten it to a great point. We had, the moment where he switched to a mallet putter after Rory mentioned it on the CBS broadcast, which was pretty hilarious, but it genuinely, something clicked with his putting stroke clearly after he made that switch. You have to use equipment to your advantage. There's no shame in that. And I think I don't know if Rory's reminder is what really made him do it, but clearly it's working for him. Phil Kenyon has also seemingly been great. He gave a little shout out to him even in his green jacket acceptance speech that, Phil is going to be part of my team for years to come. It's a very sensitive thing when a player has worked with a coach for their entire life, like with Randy Smith, and then they ask for someone to come in and give outside advice. So the fact that he's really trusting Phil and feels confident in the work that they're doing is huge. Scotty hasn't really been super open about what he's changed exactly in his putting stroke. It's definitely been like a sore subject for him, I would say. Like my colleague Brody Miller actually got a cool nugget in his piece from back at the Tour Championship where Scotty's agent apparently requested that no questions about his putting were asked in one of his post-round press conferences. So you can tell that it's something that was a little bit of an insecurity for him, as it would be if you're the best player in the world and you're missing, 3, 4, 5 footers. So it's really cool to see the kind of arc of the progression that he's made with the putting. We used to say like he could putt decently and still win the golf tournament with how he strikes the ball, but now it seems like he's just firing on all cylinders. And even though he didn't strike his irons super well during the Masters, his putter actually came and saved him a bit. So it's awesome to see how the tables are turning there.
Maybe Phil Kenyon should get more credit for turning him to a mallet as opposed to Rory. But
Right.
the Rory storyline continues to be great just from a narrative
Yes.
perspective. You talk about Scottie, his putter saving him sometimes in this tournament. How would you have ranked Scottie Scheffler's game in terms of a report card this past week at the Masters?
Oh,
Because I don't think it was A plus, and he still
no,
won the
no.
Masters by 4 shots.
Yeah, I would say somewhere like between a B plus and A minus, which is awesome because like you hear the stories about Tiger in his prime, he could win with his B game. So
Hmm.
I think that's one of the really cool things that we're seeing about Scotty is that he can blow away the field when he's not necessarily striking the ball super well. I don't know if you read through Ted Scott's transcript after the Masters, but the first 5 or 6 holes, like Scotty was airmailing the green with his irons, and he was like, "Yeah, I wasn't giving him good numbers, but something was off a little bit," and he managed to still hang in there, and then obviously stuck one on 9, which is when everything kind of started coming together again finally. But yeah, I mean, B plus A minus, I would put it in that range. I don't know. What do you think?
I was saying I felt like B. I really
Really?
did. Maybe B plus just because the shots that he hit on 9 and 14, I would say,
Right.
on Sunday were. I mean, you couldn't have hit them any better. So
Yeah.
I would say I was thinking B before Sunday. Maybe I go to B plus A minus like you did, but it certainly was not the final round of the players that we saw a few weeks ago, right? It wasn't
No.
Scotty in peak form, which is terrifying when
Mhm.
he beat 87 of the 89 players in the field by at least 7 shots. Speaking of which, Ludwig Oberg obviously
Mm.
gets the runner-up finish at 7 under. I saw people comparing it to Spieth in 2014. It reminded me of Zalatoris in 2021. That feeling of we know this guy's good, do we really know if he can compete in majors? And there it was right in front of us. When you think about Ludwig, when you think about Max's performance, another guy, by the way, who put himself in a position to win through 3 rounds when he was not playing his best golf. So that
Right.
was perhaps the most impressive for him. I would say Colin Morikawa was playing the best that he could have played for
Yeah.
those first 3 days. Didn't feel the same for Max. But when you look at the rest of this field, what were your takeaways being there at the Masters?
Yeah, I was really impressed with Ludwig. He has been someone I've had my eye on since he was in college, like playing in Dubai last year, still in his senior year at Texas Tech. That was super impressive. I think he was like maybe came in the top 10 or was in the top 10 at some point. So he's been someone who we just need to keep our eye on. If you watch him, I think he separates himself from any other player right now in just how efficient his golf swing is and even how efficient his routine is. He literally just steps up to the ball and hits it. I mean, this guy is like the definition of see ball, hit ball, and he's just having fun out there. I walked by his group, obviously on Sunday several times, and he was just laughing and joking with Joe Skovron. He's just prepared for this stage, and he really has the ability to stay level-headed even on the biggest stages like the Masters. Clearly, he's proven that. First major, he played in the Ryder Cup before he even played in a major. I mean, this kid is on another level, and I think it really took this week for us to really accept that. I love his pace of play. I love how his demeanor on the course. I love how humble he is. I think we're going to see him in the top 5 and top 10s of majors for many years to come, if not on the top of the leaderboard. Even this year, I can see him winning a major this year. So I'm all aboard the Oberg train. I still don't know how he wants people to pronounce his name. I mean,
We
it's an ever changing topic.
At PGA Tour Live, there's literally, I've posted it a couple times. There's a piece of paper that was put up over the last couple of months. It says Ludwig Oberg, I guess. Ludwig
Yeah,
Oberg.
Ludwig,
So that's what it appears is what it always, after a couple players win, I say all of a sudden, that's when guys start saying, hey, could you call me by my actual name? It's Kurt Kitayama, not Kitayama, stuff like that.
Yes.
Starts to pop up. One name that everyone in golf knows, and people perhaps who are more casual fans are starting to know more now, is Nelly Korda. As we turn our attention, we're talking on Wednesday right now of RBC Heritage and Chevron Week as we get to the first major of the LPGA Tour season. I know you've also been covering a lot of Nelly this year. She's 1 in 4 straight starts. She's 25 years old. She's been a pro now for about 8 years. She turned pro in 2016. It feels like this has been coming. This has been building, and now we have entered the era of Nelly by a wide margin. Nelly is the player right now.
Yeah, she is her, as we will say. No, Nelly is on a heater right now. Perhaps even like stronger than Scottie's heater, if I may say. I mean, we don't have the strokes gained data, which is a little bit hard to evaluate. LPGA, y'all got to work on that. But Nelly is on another level right now. I mean, something I think people don't truly recognize as the Chevron is starting up this week is that her first win of the season and her second win were separated by 7 weeks. Yeah. So she's managed to maintain this level of dominance throughout a long hiatus from competition and among several different, challenging, unique golf courses and varying conditions. Like she won, in Bradenton, Florida, and she won in Arizona when it was 50 degrees and windy and rainy. And she won at Palos Verdes, which is like this tight, hilly George Thomas design. So she can basically win anywhere. And I just think there's nothing really stopping her right now. And she's very similar to Scottie. I actually tweeted something about this earlier today, in that she really stays in her own lane, in her own bubble. She doesn't let outside distractions come in. She's very disciplined with what opportunities she says yes and no to. She has a very tight inner circle, all the qualities that you need in kind of a dominant and great player. And she has a chance to join the record books this week with 5 for 5 Nancy Lopez, and who's the other name that had 5 wins? Was it Annika? So the two of them, I mean, what better names could you be beside in a record? So I'm really pulling for Nelly this week, and she's just continued to impress week after week.
I know I have it in my notes that Nancy Lopez was the last American to win in 5 straight starts, because you wrote that, and that's where I got that from. So thank you for that. But I mentioned it a little bit in terms of Nelly, someone that we've known about since she was a teenager. I think a lot of people were thinking last year was maybe going to be the year that she took off. There were some
Mhm.
injuries. Has it taken a long time to get here, or is she right on time, arising to this dominant world number one position?
I mean, I think she's right on time. She's 25 years old. She's dealt with a bunch of injuries over the last 2 years and still managed to play good golf. She had a blood clot in her arm. She's dealt with, neck issues, and yeah, I mean, those things are hard to overcome. It's kind of you go through these stages of golf where you don't know if you're gonna be back to, the Nelly Korda that you thought you were or whatever it might be, but, she's truly found, like, this balance, I think, in it seems like in her personal life and on the golf course. So I think obviously, like, you could say that it's taken her a long time, but she turned pro at such a young age. She didn't go to college. Um, I kind of look at a player like Akshay Bhatia who skipped college as
Hmm.
well. Like people thought he was going to immediately burst onto the scene and win a bunch of times because he was so hyped up as a junior. But it does take you a couple years to kind of acclimate to this new life. And I'm not saying that Nelly didn't do that. She's won a major. She won the Olympic gold medal, so she's been super successful. So just getting to this point in her career where she's going on a crazy run, it probably just took some external factors and ironing out maybe off the golf course. And yeah, it seems like she's done that, and I think it's perfect timing for her.
Yeah, didn't win in 2023,
Yes.
but obviously has been dominant so far in 2024. You mentioned I like that Akshay Bhatia comparison. Tom Kim, another player who
Hmm.
bypassed college. It's easy to forget that Tom Kim, who's in really his second full year, but third PGA Tour season essentially, is 3 years younger than Ludwig Oberg. So
Yeah.
there's it's always fun to put that into context. In terms of Nelly, I think there's two different conversations to be had here about her career and about this season. She's got 12 wins now. She still needs more major championships, just one major championship so far. In terms of both those career and season goals, we mentioned the Scotty benchmarks. What are some sort of sites that she should have her eyes on right now?
Yeah, I think definitely the majors. That's going to be the most important. I mean, we've seen from Nelly, she's won coming from behind several times and she's won in playoffs. So she obviously has that dog in her to be able to pull it out from, behind and kind of step up to the plate in these like high pressure situations. But I think it still remains to be seen whether, she can really succeed on these major platforms, with the whole world watching some of these LPGA events, like, maybe she feels like she's kind of flying under the radar a bit and she can kind of just cruise. But then when everyone's eyeballs are on her all of a sudden and she is getting more media attention than she probably ever has in her life, we just have to see if she can keep the ball rolling there and not crumble, I guess. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what she can do at the majors this year. If she can win two majors of the five LPGA majors, I think I would call that a success. Three would be even better. I can see that happening too with just how she's playing right now. Um, U.S. Women's Open, I would say, would be like her pinnacle achievement. So the U.S. Women's Open is, I would say, I put that on like the level of like the Masters of women's golf with how much of an honor it is to win, and just being the toughest test in golf, like the men's U.S. Open. So I think that one is probably one that she's eyeing, and we'll see. Maybe Chevron will be kind of like a teaser for what she can do there at Lancaster this year.
Interesting, interesting. And think in terms of, I like what you said about, the humility and a lot of the personalities between Nelly and Scotty being similar. I think the difference when it comes to publicity is Scottie Scheffler, born in Ridgewood, New Jersey, grew up in Dallas, went to Texas. Here he is. Nelly Korda is Jessica Korda's sister, Sebastian Korda's
Yes.
sister, Peter Korda's daughter. There's a lot of, obviously, the family. They're not the most famous sports family in the world, but
Yeah.
there's more of a background that people know, can relate to, can understand. And there's just been that has surrounded Nelly for her entire life, being from such a prominent sports family.
Mhm, definitely. I think and I've heard her speak about it before, like, they get a lot of questions about being a sports family, and it's kind of this narrative that's, you're beating a dead horse a little bit at a certain point. And I think she just wants to separate herself and make her own name for herself. And she's clearly doing that right now. I think she also has like a fun social media presence. She lets us in a little bit more than Scottie does. Scottie has no social media, and I think he's spoken about how he blocks all golf publications from his phone so that he can't see them. But yeah, Nelly does let us in, and she shows her personality a bit. She laughs out there, she has fun, she jokes around, and she is kind of becoming this star in the face of women's golf in a way. When you're winning this much, like, you kind of have to become that. But she is someone that I think everyone has also wanted to become that. So it's all kind of merging together right now, those plot lines, and it's definitely super cool to see.
And we're going to see that again, the narrative with Nelly. Um, what can she bring from a publicity standpoint to the women's game? I think we're going to continue to see golf be a prominent part of the Olympics. She's the reigning gold
Hmm.
medalist at the Olympics. Paris feels like it's going to be a little different in terms of Tokyo, closer to US time zones, closer. I think American fans just might perk up a little bit more at the idea of watching not just golf, but other sports in Paris. You obviously look at what Caitlin Clark is doing right now in women's basketball, not just in the college game, but in the professional game as well. The numbers from the draft the other night were the same as the previous 6 drafts combined. So there's an incredible lightning rod potential. Not just in women's sports. I look at Tiger Woods probably in 1997, very similar to what Caitlin Clark is doing right now for women's basketball. Is there a Nelly Korda potential to become this prominent superstar that the game is looking for?
I think so. I think it kind of depends on some things that are out of her control too. I mean, we saw with the T-Mobile match play, like the final match wasn't even really shown. Like I think they showed like maybe part of the back nine,
Hmm.
which was just disappointing, honestly. And I think there are a lot of people and organizations that need to step it up in order to make her, to put her on the Caitlin Clark level. And I don't think that's necessarily possible with the resources that the LPGA is being given right now. So I like to see that happen. Do I think it will? Honestly, no, I don't. But Nelly obviously can help herself in being that personable star that everyone wants her to be and that she is, and just continuing to dominate on the course. Those are the most important things, and then hopefully the rest will follow. But putting it all on Nelly in terms of those expectations is a bit much, I would say. There are some other things that need to fall into place. The media is definitely a culprit as well. Like, I think we all need to continue to cover the women's game and recognize like the run that she's on, and and with what Scottie is doing, they're on the same level. It's the same
Hmm.
level, like same level of greatness that we're witnessing. So I think there are some outside factors that need to contribute to the potential there.
Yeah, and obviously, as we talk, hopefully Chevron being that first major will get that publicity from not just there are so many committed journalists who cover the LPGA Tour, but also various forms of other journalists who might have spent some time at Augusta last week. I was locked into my screen watching the Masters, the entire week. Obviously, I'm biased, but I thought it was interesting. I saw a friend on Monday night who said, kind of a duddy Masters, right? Not a lot of big names. I was like, what? From
Interesting.
someone, because if you follow golf, you're like Scotty, Ludwig, Colin,
Mm,
Max, Tommy, Xander. You're like ball striker, ball striker, ball striker, ball striker.
right.
But then if you're someone that is more of a casual sports fan and you don't see Tiger, Spieth, Thomas, McIlroy, Rahm, Brooks, DJ, I could go
Hmm.
on at the top. Maybe you think differently. Connecting both the men's and women's games, because Scottie and Nelly are in that same sort of position where I think it's dominant players. We've talked about it a little bit on this podcast so far about what is their personal reach. How important are stars to the game of golf, an individual sport like it is?
Super important. I think one name we haven't mentioned so far is Bryson. I think he did huge numbers probably for the
Yeah.
Masters those first 2 rounds. I mean, like a live golfer who does YouTube probably more than he does some other things that he should be doing, and using 3D printed golf clubs, lifting up the like Amen Corner sign to get out of his way. Like he just created so much content for those first 2 rounds of the Masters. That honestly, like people saying, obviously the Tiger effect contributed to the Thursday and Friday rounds being the numbers being huge, but I can guarantee you that Bryson didn't hurt either because we haven't seen him much. Like not everyone is tuning into the CW network to watch live golf. So I think characters and stars are huge. Like especially something that's been hurt among like the live PGA Tour divide. Like we lost some key villains like that. That is for sure something that's still happening. Like Patrick Reed, we don't have Brooks is a kind of villain in his own right, just being like the tough guy personality. The stars are definitely something that drive the game forward because people like attach themselves to certain personalities and there's a curiosity involved in like what those people and individuals are going to do. So I can see why your friend might have said that about the leaderboard. Like I would say Max is probably the biggest personality up there
Hmm.
that people find themselves like truly attached to with like his Twitter personality and like the roasting the golf swings. That stuff reaches the casual sports fan. Whereas like, someone who only really turns on the Masters and some of the other majors every year might not really know much about Tommy Fleetwood or Colin Morikawa. So yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and it makes sense. I think with the ratings on Sunday going down, like mostly because you just knew what was going to happen in the golf tournament already, and you might not want to sit the extra 2 hours on your couch just watching Scotty blow away everyone else. So
That and perhaps people saw the inflated Thursday, Friday, Saturday when Tiger Woods was in that afternoon TV window.
right,
That might have been misleading to where things were going to end up. Nelly, I think if she is leading or in contention at Chevron, she will have the crowd. You could argue maybe Rosang could play a part in
mm-hmm,
that, but I think when you think about the popularity of the LPGA Tour, Nelly will have that going for her. There was some talk in the social media sphere and for people on the ground. Obviously, people couldn't live tweet or share the videos, but Max seemed to be the crowd favorite at the
yeah,
beginning of
definitely.
Sunday, and Scotty was definitely not the crowd favorite early on. Is that something that Scotty's just going to have to deal with? Something that Tiger did not have to deal with? Something that Phil did not have to deal with? Something that Spieth has never had to deal with? How does that all factor in?
I don't know if Scotty, like, wasn't the crowd favorite. I don't think people were rooting against him, but I think people were really rooting for Max. Like, he by far got the loudest cheers and the most applause, like, every time he got to a tee box. Like, just people yelling his name, just being more, I think, more supportive if than Scotty. But when you have like a leader and someone who's clearly going to win the tournament, they're getting that same level of applause and support too. So I don't think people, are rooting like against Scotty or don't want to see him succeed. But like Max really has that personable and like vulnerable appeal. I think people feel like they know Max as a
Hmm.
person, so it's like you're cheering on your buddy in a way, which is a really cool thing to witness in person. Like, I'm seeing kids on the sidelines like going crazy when he makes a putt or running to the next, not running because you can't run in Augusta, but like getting to the next tee to like make sure they find a spot that they can be up close to him. And there's definitely something going on there with like the relatability of Max Homa, which I don't really think that Scotty quite has.
A true thank you for what you do online, sort of. Oh no, that was what they said to Bryson, not Max. Allegedly. We can't get you out of here without talking about the Augusta National Women's Amateur that you were at. Probably
Yes.
feels like you were there 2 months ago, but it was
Yeah.
less than 2 weeks ago. Uh, you mentioned also personalities and things being built up. I think the first ANWA I go back to, it was a lot of who's this, who's that. As we have gone on, and I've talked a lot with Amelia Miliaccio about
Mm.
this, who played in her fifth. She's the only player to play in five of these now and made the cut for the third time. There's a feeling if we start to know the players. We knew Rose last year. Some of these players seem to be more recognizable. Do you feel that energy as Lottie Woad won? Did you feel that energy of, hey, I've been following these players on the internet. I've been following the amateur rankings. I know who the prospects are coming up. I think Anwar deserves a lot of credit for building that
Mhm.
up.
Definitely. I've been saying for a while that the next generation of American girls are going to be huge on the LPGA tour. There's Amari Avery, Mega Gane, Anna Davis. There are a bunch more that I'm just blanking on right now, but the next generation of young American girls are really personable. They put themselves out there on social media. They're not afraid to, show who they truly are. And you've seen that in Anwa. We saw it at the Curtis Cup. We're going to continue to see it. There's a Curtis Cup coming up very soon. So I think that's a huge thing that I'm looking forward to for the LPGA. I think the relatable stars, similar to like a Max Homa, where you're really not afraid to show, I guess, like the behind the scenes of who they are as people. Like a lot of these girls have like personal TikTok accounts that they post on, and they like to have fun. So I'm really hopeful about that next generation, and the Anwa is hugely, that we have to thank them for allowing them to have that platform, like performing on Augusta National on a Saturday ahead of the Masters. Like you can't really get a better opportunity to show off a future star than that. Lottie obviously was amazing that day. She, burning the last two holes, like you can't really get much better than that in terms of like a final round thrill. So there's a lot of juice there, I think, in women's amateur golf that's going to eventually filter onto the LPGA.
I did a podcast with Amelia a few weeks ago, and we talked about her decision to stay an amateur. Rachel Heck
Yes.
making a very similar decision in the last couple weeks. Does Anwa play a factor in that? Why are we seeing that maybe more on the women's side of players choosing to stay as amateurs? Stuart Hagestad is probably the prime example on the men's side. But
Hmm.
why do we see it from players who have that opportunity to maybe play Epson Tour or LPGA Tour?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if it's quite a trend yet. Like, I feel like the main, figures that we've seen do that are Rachel and Amelia. So I'm not ready to like make a proclamation that this is a thing yet, but I think it was really brave what, Rachel decided to do. Writing that piece for No Laying Up was a really cool way to announce it to you on her own terms. And I wrote a story about Rachel during Anwa Week and, talked to her family and some of the people in her life about it. And it honestly just seemed like she didn't really get burnt out in a way, but she kind of just realized that there were things and parts of life that she wanted to experience more than the 24/7 grind of traveling for the LPGA. I think this LPGA and Epson Tour schedule is actually a little bit more daunting than people really know, especially like the financial component of competing on the Epson Tour. Like if you're not playing well on the
Mm-hmm.
Epson Tour, like you're just losing money.
Yep.
So like the travel costs are very high, and not everyone has like the backing to support that effort to make it to the LPGA tour. So there are a lot of factors involved. I think obviously like as prize money continues to go up on the LPGA, like we might see less of that and girls like finding it more worth it to pursue a career in professional golf. Um, but for Rachel and Amelia, like I think it was genuinely just a realization that there is more to life than just golf. And it seems like both of them are going to continue to play amateur golf. And I know that Rachel, for a fact, is very inspired by Stu Hagestad. She like wants to
Mm-hmm.
be like the female version of Stu. So I think we'll see her for many years to come. Hopefully at Anwa, definitely at USGA championships. So I'm not ready to declare it a trend just yet, but there are definitely like certain factors that might be contributing to that.
In terms of your own career, I do want to ask, now that you are at the Athletic, you've been there a couple of months, what do you want to cover in golf? What might you be able to cover more now at this new position?
Yeah, a lot. I think one of the coolest parts about the Athletic is, and partly due to the subscription model and also just the like mission of the company, is that they really want us to provide like kind of you know, the details, the analysis, the stuff that you might not necessarily find elsewhere, and they want to give their writers and journalists like the time to actually find those things. So I'm feeling really hopeful and excited about the resources like at my disposal and the actual time and dedication that I'm going to be able to put into the stories that I think really matter. So at Sports Illustrated, I was able to travel around the country and cover my first majors, and but I was largely focused on like news and the daily happenings of golf, which was incredible training. And I will never be able to truly describe like what that year and a half did for me as a journalist. And I really learned a ton about, just the industry in general. But now I'm kind of feel like I'm taking the next step and I'm really able to hone in on the topics that I find the most intriguing, and that I think could appeal to maybe a wider, broader audience. Obviously, The Athletic has the New York Times um, readership at its disposal, which is a really cool resource to have as well. So I'm kind of always thinking about like what is the golf story that, people would care about, not just golf fans would care about. So one thing that really interests me is the mental side of the game. I've always been passionate about sports psychology, and um, you know, at Pomona, we worked with a sports psychologist, Dr. Kevin Saduk, who works with the USC golf team, and there's a lot of things I've learned over the years about the mental side of golf that I think is really impressive, and that's part of the reason why I'm so fascinated with Scottie and Nelly and what they're doing right now. So I think that's an area that I want to explore a little bit more, and hopefully you'll see some of that from me down the road.
And Julie Elion, right? You got to get that
Yes.
story. I'll say it too that you were doing a lot of aggregating at Sports Illustrated, and now you're able to do a lot more feature writing and in-depth reporting. So you
Yes.
might not say it, but it's great to see you freed up to do it. Sorry, I interrupted there. I think you were going to say something about the mental side
No,
of the
I
game.
was I was gonna say Julie is like just so cool. I've tried to reach out to her. Julie, if you're watching this, I want to talk to you. But basically, yeah, there's like this movement where, sports psychology is becoming something that's more and more accepted, more and more talked about, especially even in the junior and college level. I think now it's kind of like a staple of something that younger players are doing, and is leading to, um, these types of like up and comers really being able to succeed at a high level early on. So it's a cool trend that I'm hoping to explore a little bit more. And Julie is definitely at the forefront of that.
Well, maybe we'll see some stories of the mental approach to golf coming up.
Yes.
Give Gabby Herzig a follow. Follow all of her work at The Athletic. I guess, I think it's the only thing that I actually subscribe to, that I actually
Oh, that's
put my
nice to
money
hear.
towards. So I feel good about that. I think I took advantage of one of those offers a couple of years ago to get started and still reading along. So Gabby, thanks so much for being on Eyes on Golf.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks so much to Gabby for dropping in. Love that conversation about what's going on in golf right now. Definitely feels like something that we're going to have maybe other writers on, other personalities on throughout the year to check in on Scottie and Nelly's season and how they are going. Last week's pod with Joe Pompliano, want to appreciate a lot of the feedback that I got on that. Joe was awesome with his time, put out some incredible Masters content as the tournament went on. And definitely, I think that we will bring in some sports biz angles, golf biz angles into this podcast. So definitely got the mind and the wheels turning on the Eyes on golf end for myself and our production team. Thank you to all of you for listening to Eyes on Golf. Enjoy the RBC Heritage, enjoy the Chevron, and we will talk to you next time.